This is probably one of the worst times to go live on TikTok, I would imagine. Although there's a few people in here now, so hello everyone. I can usually tell that the first few people that join my lives probably just joined it off their For You page and have no idea what they're getting into. They're like, oh, this is a paramedic, this is cool. And then I start talking about paramedic things and they're like, I have absolutely no idea what's going on here. But welcome anyway. I'm doing a wake up live. I'm drinking my coffee. Oh, you got a notification. You're a paramedic student. Awesome. How far into your class are you? And how are you liking it? TikTok just informed me that more likes can attract viewers, so keep it up. I got 1 like, yay! And you follow me, you're an EMT in Nebraska. Well, guess what? In March, I think I'm speaking at the Nebraska EMS conference. So you're surviving your class. Awesome. Keep it up. Keep it up. And then don't take the breaks off when you get out of class. Keep learning. Jump into something else and keep learning. Love your content. I missed my P class by 1 point. Oh, man. I'm sorry. That sucks. You're on duty in North Carolina. Fire medic Mike is on duty in North Carolina. What part of North Carolina? It's too early. I know, right? I've been up since 6. I guess I'm just that age. Although I went to bed early last night, so Morganton. I don't even know where that is. I lived in Wilmington for 20 years. Oh, now we're from Asheville. Okay, so you're on the western side of North Carolina. Or is that Asheboro? Which one is out there in the western North Carolina? Is it Asheville or Asheboro? I've been to, I can't remember which one now. Thank you for the follow, Bryce. Asheville. Okay, that's what I thought. Supposedly they have a 98 pass rate for a zero medic. I don't know. I'm not sure what we're talking about. Oh, your accelerated course? Thank you for the follow, Alex. Got a lot of people in here, not a lot of questions. You're the ones who got to keep this moving, not me. Not only that, but, I use my lives to farm good topics to clip into videos that I can use. I'm going into my 4-day work week, and having like a bank of good topics that I've talked about on live to edit into like 1 to 2 minute clips is really good to have while I'm working, because I don't have the opportunity to record as much as I'd like when I'm working. That Shield makes me sad now that they are making a Captain America movie without Steve Rogers. Well, I mean, that follows the comics, Captain America, it's actually not linearly following the comics, because after Steve Rogers, Captain America was Bucky Barnes, and then Sam became Captain America. But, it's canon. Well, thank you, Medic Ray. I appreciate that. You're going to make me blush. I know, but some parts of the comics weren't meant for cinematic viewership. Oh, I mean, I completely agree with you. Steve Rogers Chris Evans as Steve Rogers was amazing. Why is Narcan helpful in cardiac? Narcan is only useful in an OD. Let's talk about how that could be helpful. So first of all, let's just pretend that this new study that demonstrated that empiric administration of Narcan, meaning basically giving it to everyone, potentially improves survival. Let's just say you're giving Narcan only because you suspect opiate or opioid. I think you can just say opioid, and that covers everything. Opioid overdose. Let's say your patient is in PEA. There's a lot of PEA that actually isn't pulseless arrest. You just haven't been able to palpate a pulse, or it's not strong enough. In that case, administering Narcan could actually reverse your pseudo arrest. And I've seen that time and time again, where ACLS was initiated on a patient with narcotic overdose, but they weren't really in an arrest, and within 30 to 45 seconds of giving the Narcan, they're basically just like pushing everyone away. Now let's talk about how this could potentially affect people across the board, OD or no OD. Narcan doesn't only displace opioids from opiate receptors on your cells, it displaces your own endogenous, searching for a word now that just left. Boy, doesn't that suck? What's that thing that you get when you exercise? Oh, endorphins. God, why? Why did that word escape me? It displaces your own endorphins off of your opiate receptors. And your endorphins are something your body sends you to pacify you or to make you feel happy. And when you're having a good day, you're doing things that make you feel good. You are given endorphins to confirm that happiness. And when you're in times of distress, your body also releases endorphins to pacify you. And that can inhibit the effects of the sympathetic nervous system. So Narcan can actually displace those endorphins so that your sympathetic nervous system actually works a little bit harder. And that's how Narcan could actually exert its effects on anyone in cardiac arrest. But we need more data. Definitely my favorite channel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Good morning from EMS Standby at Motocross in East Tennessee. Well, good morning to you. Where you work, are you using iGel or another SGA? Do you do any type of gastric suctioning? So I've worked in 2 places, and I still work part-time in one place and full-time in another. Where I worked for the last 13 years, they have primarily switched to iGels for cardiac arrest. Where I work full-time, which is in neonatal and pediatric critical care transport, we almost never use a supraglottic airway. We maintain competency in intubating kids. We perform rapid sequence intubation. And yes, we do gastric suctioning. Ultrasound to confirm VFib. I don't know if ultrasound to confirm VFib is necessary. I mean, VFib is a fairly obvious rhythm, but ultrasound to confirm PEA is definitely beneficial. Good morning from C-Shift EMS in northern Wyoming. Man, I would love to visit Wyoming. how much time you taking to do that over shocking? My point exactly. VFib is fairly obvious. So the time it would take to, I mean, I guess you could have your probe ready to go once compressions are stopped, but it still takes just a second. If you stop compressions and you see squiggly lines that make no sense, shock. And if you're unsure that it's VFib, or excuse me, if you're unsure if it's asystole or fine VFib, I would lean toward shocking. But will the Narcan champions finally admit that epi doesn't improve outcomes? Empiric administration every 5 minutes of epi doesn't improve outcomes, but Resuscitation's paper of the month this month is a paper that a single service observational study that demonstrates that a single administration of intramuscular Narcan at intramuscular epinephrine of 5 milligrams improved neurologically intact survival. So we get tripped up on the epi discussion. It's not about epinephrine as a whole. It's about continuously loading people with epinephrine, because not only are we repeatedly causing profound cerebral hypertension, but we keep doing it over and over and before the effects of the previous epinephrine wear off. So we start epinephrine stacking. Thank you for the follow, Joshua Volk. First aid number 1, for a massive hemorrhage from the head, always tourniquet the neck. I mean, sure, you can confirm VFib with an ultrasound, but it's not worth your time. What's your experience or thoughts on community paramedicine? I'm a big fan of community paramedicine. The services that I was familiar with in North Carolina that implemented community paramedicine saw amazing success with that program. Your state has to have tort reform for that to work. Tort reform is essentially modifying your liability laws in your state so that not transporting a patient doesn't come with the liability that it normally would. Do you think that epi is doing more harm than good? In the way we administer it, yes. Book recommendations? The Vasopressor and Inotrope Handbook, amazing book. I would absolutely read that book. Ventilator Management, a pre-hospital perspective. This is the ventilator book. This is the industry standard on ventilator books, written by Eric Bauer with FlightBridge. If you're getting into flight, HEMS Essentials, written by Chris Sharp. That will prepare you for flight. Great book. 2 very accessible books for ECG Hero, written by Shade Tree Cardiology and Charlie Swearingen, the Angry Medic. Vent Hero, written by Charlie Swearingen. This one is actually a very accessible book for people who are wanting to dip their toes into learning about ventilator management. And then this is the book that you want to read if you're wanting to study on your own for critical care. Actually, you know what? There's 2 other books that I wanted to talk about. Where are they? Oh, I guess they're in my backpack. I'm actually going to do a video on the books that you can get on Amazon's Kindle Unlimited, which is a service you pay $11 a month for, and they have like 1 million books that you can read for free. And there's a lot of EMS related content there, and some really good books where, you know, you can get a 30-day trial and download those books and read them over the course of a week. But really though, $11 a month to read all that medical content, because there's a ton of medical content on there, is actually worth it. TXA for GI bleeds. No quality evidence that it helps, and there's some evidence that demonstrates that outcomes are worse. Thanks for all your clean and clear videos, learning every time. Thank you so much. If it's shockable, shock it. If it's not, don't. If you're unsure, shock it. That's a pretty good way to look at it. There's some evidence that even what we really truly believe is asystole is fine VFib, and there may be a benefit to shocking it. There's no evidence, no quality evidence that demonstrates that we're hurting anyone by shocking them. So if you can't tell if it's AFib, VFib, or asystole, follow your local protocols, but I would just shock. 16-year ER nurse, 1 TC, love your content. Always more to learn. Keep on keeping on, bro. Hey, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Nice to learn how paramedicine works in the US. In the Netherlands, we only have nurses on ambulances. Yeah, so people who, say that nurses can't do what we do, there you go. I would love to learn more about how stuff works. And we know in the US a little bit about how things work in the UK and Canada and Australia. We get a lot of information on how things work there, but not so much in those North Atlantic states. Would love to know more about how things work in the Netherlands. And I am half Dutch, by the way. My family are actually, well, maybe not Dutch, they're Fries. And I can still remember my grandmother yelling at me in Dutch as I was a kid, messing around at the dinner table. What would she yell at me in Dutch? It's on the tip of my tongue. She would yell, it was Dutch for eat your food. Smakelijk eten. She would yell smakelijk eten at me. How do I feel about Bob Page? Bob Page turned a lot of people on to learning more about cardiology. And there is a lane that he owns, a very accessible lane for getting people into cardiology. I think that the rise of social media has kind of marginalized him a little bit, because he was what someone like me or Shade Tree Cardiology or somebody like that are now back then. He was this guy coming in and being a disruptor to paramedic education. But with the age of social media, he's just kind of doing his thing, which is fine. He goes around and still does conferences, that sort of thing. And that's great. But, he's been marginalized a little bit by people who are just picking up a phone and educating people. This man finna go through all those books. Rapid Interpretation of ECG was a great book when I went through immediate paramedic. Please do not recommend that book anymore. The author, Dale Durbin, is a convicted pedophile and is currently imprisoned. Or at least he served prison time. I'm not sure if he's still in prison. I think he is. But there are better books out there, books that have been updated and that are more accurate, and we just want that book to disappear into oblivion. Even though the profits do go to some sort of victim fund, but we just want that book to go away. Where do you typically source the research papers you find? The thing is that I don't have to go find most papers. I'm pretty well connected in EMS. People who are really out there doing the work and reading and active on social media are just, those people are all going to find each other. And the people who are on the very front lines of research are going to immediately post their research. The journals that you follow online are going to post research. So, I'm just going to open up Twitter in the morning, and if there's a new study, it's going to be right there. Either because the journal has posted it or one of my friends has posted it. I don't have to go looking for it. But Resuscitation Journal is great. Chest Journal is great. British Medical Journal is great. JAMA is great. New England Journal of Medicine, all those things. Mark became the number 19 member on the team. I have a team? What kind of a team do I have? Is it a good team? Do we even lift? What changes to the NREMT scope are you hoping to see eventually? To see point of care ultrasound, something that is part of the regular medic toolkit. I'd like to see IV Tylenol, something that's emphasized as a frontline analgesic. Pericardiocentesis, I would like to see part of the something that we regularly train for. I don't know. I'd have to think about it for a little while, and then I wouldn't be getting to questions. These are actually stacking up. So, are you fond of the epi drip and cardiac arrest? The thing is that services that switched to epi drip kind of did that after the Paramedic 2 trial, and then COVID hit, and then because survival was overall lower during COVID, they didn't have a way of interpreting their data, how the epi drip affected their numbers. And so it's going to take another year or so to get that data on how an epi drip factors into survival. So I just don't know. Would you take a course for critical care or self-study? I would take a course. It's great to have someone leading you through this material. I believe Illinois has a pre-hospital cert for nursing. I think Nevada does too. Hey bud, have a great day. Hope you find a random 20 in your washer. You mean like paper money? Man, I'd hate to have to carry paper money around, but thank you for the sentiment. What state are you in? I thought you heard say I'm North Carolina. I'm from West North Carolina. I'm in Georgia, but I lived for 20 years in Wilmington, North Carolina. Do you agree with Texas taking regular people and teaching them medic stuff and not making them... I didn't get the end of that. I'm a PICU nurse and ER nurse, and I would love to work on the ambulance. Hope to go there next year. I'm on neonatal and pediatric critical care transport, and it's a medic nurse team. And a lot of our nurses were PICU nurses. Basic 12-lead book is by World's Okayest Medic, one that can't be used in school. Yeah, well, I don't actually recommend taking those outside resources. I don't recommend relying too much on non-curriculum resources when you're in paramedic school, because the problem is now that you have to pass a test, right? And I learned early on as a paramedic taking on preceptees that applying too much real world stuff and trying to teach them that they became disruptors to the classroom and sometimes had a difficult time in differentiating between what they needed to know to pass a test and what they needed to know to practice. And so I don't recommend that people pull in too many outside resources during their class, unless you just have that sort of bandwidth. Who's a good person to follow on Twitter to learn what you're learning? Okay, so interesting. Let me go on Twitter and I'll just call out some names. Dr. Peter Antevi is always posting good content. Here's the problem with Twitter. There used to be this trend on Twitter called FOAM, free online. There used to be this trend on Twitter called FOAM, free open access medical education. And it was people committed to getting medical information out from behind paywalls. And they put time and effort into circulating information that was beneficial to all providers to know. And it was an amazing time to be alive on Twitter, because you just opened Twitter and you just were learning things every single day. If you were following just medical people, which is the only thing I use Twitter for, is to follow medical people. But now, Twitter's a dumpster fire. It is it is just gross and disgusting and political, and it's just the worst. And I'm very close to just kind of like getting off of Twitter and just hoping that Threads picks up where Twitter left off. But anyway, Dr. Peter Antevi is good to follow on Twitter. I really just don't have time to go through all that right now. I was going to scroll Twitter, but then I realized all these people are like critical care people and people who are, I'm just not going to get into that right now. Sorry. We just got IV Tylenol added to the protocol. Awesome. Any recommendations on material to study for FPC? Recently joined flight. Well, I would definitely get the critical care textbook. And then, I have critical care courses that I go through every year from FlightBridge and from Impact. I would really recommend getting those. I wish states that use National Registry for state tests would allow us what we were taught to use in the field. Yeah. Do you agree that Texas is allowing people to go straight to medic school and skipping EMT school? I mean, Texas is a pretty high-performing state, and they are a delegated practice state, meaning that instead of just doing what the registry says that they can do, the medical directors decide what their medics can do. And it seems to be working for them. I just hit my year mark as a paramedic and the itch to learn and grow resurfaced. Where should I start? With a critical care course, either a local course or a comprehensive online course like through Creighton University, or a self-paced course like you would get through FlightBridge or Impact. And by the way, I'm 0 to hero. I did basic, EMT, intermediate, and then paramedic, and my first job was as a paramedic. But I volunteered a ton during that 2 years. My first day working on an ambulance was not my first day on an ambulance. Yeah, foam frat is a great thing too. I'm neglecting my coffee. Hello, bossy paramedic girl. I refuse to say X for Twitter. That's so stupid. I've never seen someone mismanage a business the way Elon Musk has mismanaged Twitter. But, I mean, maybe it's exactly what he wants it to be. LinkedIn is a great resource too. LinkedIn is just one of those social media platforms that it just doesn't fit. It just is this extra thing that I don't have time to do anything with. What's a good place to learn more about EMS as an EMT? What is it that you want to learn? Hey, Avenger, paramedic from West Tennessee. Good to see you. Now, with that being said, do you think more states will incorporate that 0 to medic? No, I don't think so. Right, never neglect the coffee. Okay, now I'm caught up. Hey, Mike Joyce. Glad to see you. I recognize you from the Book of Faces. Tell them to watch Bringing Out the Dead. You know what? I didn't like that movie. It made me feel bad. And it made me feel anxious and desolate. And that's probably the intent, but I don't like feeling like that. So I just didn't like that movie. I want to learn higher education before I get my medic. Like, for example, reading case studies. You just have to start plugging into people that are smarter than you. Join good Facebook groups is a good start. Not like, Rocking Savage Paramedics or something like that, but some sort of paramedic Facebook group that is obviously education based. Join groups for like Impact EMS and Heavy Lies the Helmet. And, there's good discussions there. The Foam Frat Facebook group, those are, there's always good discussions happening there. And you'll find that when you start participating in those discussions and asking questions, that you'll start forming connections and building a huge network across the country. And when that happens, all that information starts coming to you. Where's the cap shield from? My kids gave that to me for Christmas like 10 years ago. I see George Taylor. Oops, this is serious talk. Oh yeah, the Lighthouse Project through Flightbridge is a great podcast. Very accessible too. I launched my podcast a few weeks ago, waiting for inspiration to hit to record the second episode. Oh man, the Flightbridge Epi podcast was amazing. Y'all check out a new podcast called Medicated and Motivated from Ashley, and that would be Ashlyn Odell. Yep, her podcast is great. World's Okayest Medic podcast is great. I also recommend the Standard of Care podcast. It's actually a podcast for the legal aspects of EMS, but it's not like legalese. It is providing you as a provider information that you need to know in your daily practice from a legal standpoint. Thoughts on PTSD treatment for first responders? Well, I think that states need to see PTSD as a workplace injury, and they need to take responsibility for treating it most of all. George, you're sending me stuff. Oh, EMS 2020 is a good podcast, yes. And also, I think it's called what is it called? There's a new podcast that I really like. It's EMS something, not the EMS show, but God, I can't remember what it is now. I don't think that I can close TikTok and open Instagram to find it, so I'm not going to do that right now. God, what the hell is it called? I'm so embarrassed because I really like these guys. Morning, Flightline Coffee. Mind Body Medic. Yeah, but he hasn't put out anything recently as far as I know. I love Roadside to Recess. That's a UK podcast, but that's a great podcast. The OG. There's the OG right there. Ginger Locke has not put a lot of time and effort into that podcast recently because she's just in a really good place as far as like life and outlook and love, and it's just not her first priority right now, and I'm really happy for her. Mind the Front Line. Yeah, I actually was asked to be on that podcast, and we just haven't connected yet. But yeah, that's a great podcast as well. Ashlyn Odell is fantastic, and you're probably going to see great things from her. Not probably, you're definitely going to see great things from her in the next couple of years. Dan Limmer's podcast, I've appeared on that. That's a good podcast. Yep, absolutely. He just had one with David Pfeiffer, who is a wilderness medic and also very well known in academic circles and EMS, and that was a good podcast. More people need to know about Mind the Front Line, which is a mental health resource for kind of frontline healthcare providers. It was formerly called the Wounded Paramedic Project. I go through periods where I like just completely just absorb all these podcasts, and then I go through a period where I've kind of reached saturation, and I'll just listen to other stuff. You're the Arizona ambassador from On the Front Line. Chris has done a great job with it. Yep. I was asked, yeah, the wounded medic. I was asked to participate in like doing stuff for Mind the Front Line, and I fully intended to do that. I just found that I didn't have the bandwidth for it. I feel bad about that, but I guess if you're not specifically motivated, that maybe, that obviously you should just admit, look, this is not something that's motivating me. I don't have the bandwidth for this right now. And I'm really committed to developing my national EMS mentoring project, where if you're looking for an EMS mentor, I can get you connected to a mentor. That's not withering on the vine. I'm still actively developing that, and recently just got a lifeline on that too, as far as resources and infrastructure. So that's kind of really where my commitment is right now. But Mind the Front Line is doing great work, man. They're just doing great work for first responders. Avenger, huge fan of your content. Great work. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really want to get this National EMS Mentoring Project off the ground, but I don't want to just half-ass it. There can be a tremendous liability in connecting someone that hasn't been properly vetted, I want to develop a set of standards and ethics that people agree to, and make sure that there's a way to vet people properly before we do that. I would be interested in helping with the mentorship. That sounds great. I didn't have one. Yeah, I had good mentors, and I try to be a mentor to people. Morning, Mike. How you doing, man? I don't remember where I was just going with that. I lost my train of thought. When I had COVID I had COVID during the Delta variant and was in the hospital in an ICU, and was on BiPAP for a little while. I was really sick. They were talking about intubating me, and I insisted a BiPAP trial, and it what turned me around immediately. However, my point is that I had what they call COVID fog after that. And how that manifested itself was that like 10 to 12 times a day, I thought that I forgot what I was talking about with someone. But I may not have been talking about anyone. And if I was in a conversation with that person, I didn't actually lose track. That's the best way I can describe it, is that it felt like I forgot what I was talking about with someone. And it was really disruptive, because you'd just be sitting there, like me and my girlfriend would just be sitting there like reading, and I'd be like, I'm sorry, I lost track of what we were saying. And she was like, we haven't said a word in like 10 minutes. Anyway, that's a story. Iron sharpens iron. Definitely need more EMS mentors. Yeah, and in the modern age where EMS is so freaking toxic, we need to have a network of people who are committed to being better. One of your old coworkers came to work part-time with me. Awesome. I'm sure you don't want to say the name, but that's awesome. Hope they didn't trash me. Getting a whole blood program started soon with our ground service, but man, it's been tough. Yeah, people are so resistant to whole blood, but at this point, we're at this point in time where it's undeniable that it's beneficial and that it saves lives. So it's not about now the expense and the logistics. It's about what you're doing to get through the problems of expense and logistics. Like, solve the problem now. Let me know more about your mentorship program, I tend to do it from time with future flight peeps. I absolutely will. How would we use the mentors? I'm currently in paramedic school. Well, you're basically just connected to them. And I'm not sure if it's going to be the sort of thing where you just wait for a spark and see if there's, and where you contact them from time to time, or they contact you, or whether there will actually be a program that, there's a guided way of bringing you into that program. What I would like to do is have regions in the U.S. where there is somebody who oversees that region and they serve as a mentor to mentors, and where there's regularly like Zoom meetings, where people talk and get on the same page. But that's what I would like to see is constant communication from the top down. I wish I had a mentor now. I keep putting off taking my medic test. Why? Why are you putting it off? Every day you put it off, you are less ready to take it. What advances to EMTB scope do you see coming down the road? I think that they're going to get epinephrine and probably IM epinephrine, depending on how that data pans out. I would like to see EMTBs able to manually defibrillate rather than use an AED. And the reason is because an AED takes too long to analyze the rhythm and charge up. Any perishock pause, and your perishock pause is the moment from when you stop compressions and you defibrillate. That pause in between that's your perishock pause. Any perishock pause of greater than 5 to 6 seconds reduces the likelihood of terminating VTAC or VFib by about 20%. And an AED can analyze sometimes. It could take 10, 15 seconds to analyze. And that's just because, everyone has hands off. And then someone might just kick the leg of that person. And now it's starting all over again to ensure that it's capturing VFib and not just artifact. Or the patient someone might still be ventilating, or the patient might still be experiencing agonal respirations, which also confuses the AED. And so it can take a while to analyze. And so that can be a death sentence to a patient. So I would like to see EMTBs able to manually defibrillate. We are a decent-sized city, so it's a battle with scene time and being close to a level 1 trauma center. Yeah, well, New Orleans demonstrated that a metropolitan area saves lives with blood, and that it added an average of no more than 3 minutes to their scene time. Getting ready to go and teach a DSD class. You have a whole class dedicated to dual sequential defibrillation? We may be integrating HIROB into our program with stable. I don't know what HIROB is, but stable is a pediatric certification, which from what I understand, is a really good class. In my opinion, IV access should be taught in the EMTB class. I tend to agree, but what we're doing now is we're actually talking about eliminating the basic certification, which I'm kind of in favor of. My opinion is just an opinion there and not an informed one. You're not confident in the material, I need to know it all? Okay, so that's like somebody saying, I'm going to wait to have children until I'm ready. You're never ready to have children. It's not like you're, okay, I have this and I have this and I have this and I've done this and I've done this and I've done this. I can have my child now. You just have a child and you learn how to take care of it. You take the test and you learn how to take the test. You have 3 shots before you have to remediate. Go take the frickin' test, man. Where are you from as an EMS professional? I started in North Carolina and now I'm in Georgia. Is dual sequential defib in Georgia? I mean, I don't know about services that have it as a protocol, but I've done it in Georgia. I mean, it's all over the place. Do you have a link to the New Orleans EMS whole blood study? It's in my link tree in my bio. I mean, it's been a month or two since I posted that link, so you're going to have to scroll for it. Any classes or direction for leadership in EMS? I don't know, because I've always my lane has always been kind of like in talking about medicine and evidence-based medicine, and I've never really involved myself in the politics or the logistics or the leadership aspect of EMS, so I really don't know. Eliminating EMTV would decimate rural EMS. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's a valid take, and so maybe that's why we just need to open up the skill creep into the basic EMS formulary. I don't know. That's I've been asked about that before, and I've had to, acknowledge that I'm not spending a lot of time thinking about that or reading papers or discussing it. Like, that sort of stuff isn't really on my front line as far as things that are priority to me. There's Hero Link. Hero Link. I think you sent me this, and I fully intend to make a video on it. I just haven't done it yet. If you're still live, I might take you to DSD class with me. Absolutely, go for it. And you can pass me questions or whatever you want to do. I'll stick around. My coffee is still half full. Any recommendations for books on vent management? This one right here. Ventilator Management, a Pre-Hospital Perspective. This is the ventilator management resource, and if you will message me, I will send you this book. Are you attending EMS Expo? I was, but now I'm not. I've been traveling a lot for conferences. I had to go to North Carolina for a critical care conference. I went to Montana for a critical care conference. I may go to Philadelphia for a critical care conference. And I just have to stop the bleeding somewhere. So probably not. EMS leadership isn't much different than reading leadership-driven books. So that means you need to read Who Moved My Cheese, right? How do you feel about the EleGuard? Okay, so let's talk about the EleGuard. The EleGuard is what we call neuroprotective CPR or heads-up CPR. And the goal of neuroprotective CPR is not just to restart the heart, but restart the brain. It's one thing to get ROSC. It's another thing to get someone back who can do a crossword puzzle, who can recognize their loved ones, who can, go for a walk, who can function in their house and do housework and go back to work. And we think that sometimes we're actually saving the heart at the expense of the brain. And that's because compressions, when you push down on the chest, you're perfusing the brain. When you let off of the chest, you're perfusing the heart. And there's a lot of factors involved in perfusing the heart. And sometimes we can actually not come up all the way. We may not perfuse the heart very well. Your hand placement or the mechanical CPR placement may not be ideal. And so it's kind of compressing the aortic valve and not doing a very good job of allowing blood through into the coronary arteries. But you can still be doing a bang-up job of pushing blood out into different spaces in the body. Including the brain, and you can actually suffer from some pretty significant intracerebral pressure during CPR, which can be harmful. And then you throw epinephrine on top of it, and you can actually just be destroying the brain with CPR and epinephrine. And so we have this thing called heads-up CPR, which is attempting to use a gravity assist by elevating the patient's thoracic and their head and their thorax to provide a little bit of a gravity assist to get some of that blood out of there so that that cerebral hypertension isn't as severe. The Eligard gradually raises the patient, their head and thorax, over a period of 2 minutes and then gradually lowers it. It lowers it again so that we can get blood here to return to the heart, and it raises it to reduce that intracerebral pressure. And there's a Lucas plate built into that device, so you can just take your Lucas pedestal and snap it in there. And there needs to be an advanced airway placed with an impedance threshold device on it, the rescue pod. That is the bundle of care that is the Eligard. The problem with the Eligard is that the data does not support its premise, which is that it increases neurologically intact survival. The body of evidence demonstrates that it's not doing that. In fact, there was a pretty recognized study that came out a few years ago that said that it did. It was the first data that we had that demonstrated that it improved survival. A secondary analysis of that survival determined that the authors of the study were kind of cherry picking which data they liked. Not purposefully, it wasn't malicious. Sometimes you get enthusiastic for your data. And so you like data a little bit more that supports your premise, and maybe you don't like so much the data that works against your premise. And so you overemphasize the significance of the data that you like. It's called data dredging, actually. And there's also animal studies. Initially, there were some animal studies that demonstrated that it did what it said it was supposed to do, which was reduce intracerebral pressures. But subsequent data has demonstrated that it doesn't do that. Now, there's a large RCT going on in the UK right now with the Eligard. This will be the first powered data that we have on heads-up CPR. Now, what I want to add is that this bundle of care with the Eligard, that is the bundle of care that is heads-up CPR. If you're elevating people on backboards 30 degrees and just leaving them there, you're not doing it right, and you're probably hurting that patient. That patient's a wide open container. They're vasoplegic, they're in relative hypovolemic shock, and you're sending all their blood to their lower extremities. That's not the way heads-up CPR works. That will be a video I edit out and post this weekend. Let's see what I've missed. Somebody said Eligard's an expensive pillow. There you go. Have you seen the PCHD EMS full cardiac risk video on YouTube? Oh, yes, I have. In fact, I've clipped some stuff out of there and still intend to do so. Spicy FA. Are you talking about the one that was then reviewed subsequently, like by Peter Antevy and the medical director there? Okay, so I have a huge criticism against what that medical director is saying versus what they're doing. And I take this with a grain of, I want to make sure it's understood that I'm not criticizing the people that are working there, and I'm sure that they're doing good work and that their survival numbers have increased. But that medical director who was interviewed said that they were performing high-performance CPR. And I can tell you by looking at that video that they're not performing high-performance CPR. There were people who had very strange postures as far as the way they were approaching their compressions that didn't line up with high-performance CPR. They didn't get that. They didn't drag that patient out where they could work. And their approach when ALS arrives is to leave the patient on the AED rather than switching over to manual defibrillation. And the very first time that they defibrillate, it took 20 to 30 seconds to get to a point where they could actually defibrillate because the AED kept reanalyzing and reanalyzing and reanalyzing, and then they didn't like the pad position. Like, that's not high-performance CPR. It's a goat fuck. So, no, I don't think that using the AED instead of manually defibrillating lines up with the spirit of high-performance CPR, which is to eliminate pauses and to perform at such a high level that you are performing CPR perfectly. I think that he's calling high-performance CPR. I think that it's like we take resuscitation seriously, which you need to, and I'm sure they train at a high level, but maybe high-performance CPR is a goal for them, but when you look at that video, they definitely did not achieve it. Now, fortunately, that person in that video survived. And something else I want to emphasize about that video is that there are a lot of people who are very skeptical about bystander CPR and about the teaching that we don't want people doing pulse checks and overanalyzing the patient's breathing. What we want in bystander CPR is if a patient becomes unresponsive and they're not breathing normally, we want them to start compressions. It is much more beneficial for them to start compressions, risk breaking a rib or two, rather than to delay compressions and reduce the likelihood that a patient won't survive. This video demonstrates why we don't want people doing pulse checks. And I'll have to make a video on this. Maybe I'll cut this video that I'm doing now and I'll edit that part in. But when the person the people who work at the store where this person collapsed, and when they call to report that this patient collapsed and there's a bystander doing CPR, number one, he's doing terrible CPR. He's straddling the patient, and doing a couple compressions, then stopping, and he's compressing like 70, 80 times per minute, maybe. But the person who's on the phone and the person who's compressing, like there's messages that they're attempting to pass between the dispatcher and to the person who's doing compressions on how to properly do compressions. And they are in such shell shock from what they're doing. They are so cognitively overloaded by what's happened in front of them that they simply cannot communicate with each other. Like the person on the phone tells the compressor that they need to do compressions every 2 seconds, and so the compressor stops and slows down even more. Like the notion that in that state, in that hyperacute, hyperaware state, that they could palpate a pulse in a short amount of time is absurd. Cognitively, they simply cannot do it. And that is why we want bystanders to stop doing pulse checks, because it's too much for their brains to handle. Do the compressions. Enjoying a pumpkin spice latte with some early morning learning with Jimmy. That's awesome. In Colorado, no less. Part of my soul is in Colorado. Somebody sent me a donut. I don't understand all those gift things, but I guess it's cool. I am going to be an EMT. That's fantastic. You need to connect with a good EMT and start with some good mentoring. Stay away from the complainers. Stay away from the toxic people. Please don't let any of that get on you. Please, please, please. And let me tell you right now, okay? You say you're going to be an EMT. Do you actually know what you're getting into? Do you think that what's going to happen is that you go through EMT school and you get on a truck doing 911 and people are going to be calling you because they are experiencing a medical emergency? Is that the way you view EMS? Because that is not what you're going to be getting into. First of all, you probably aren't going to start in 911 unless you're working in an area where they're fairly desperate and they're putting new EMTs right on 911 trucks. You're probably going to start in intra-facility, where you go to a hospital and take an elderly patient who fell and got a CT scan. You're going to be taking them back to a nursing home. You're going to do that 7 or 8 times a day. And then when you finally get to 911, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be responding to someone that is experiencing something abnormal about their health. It may be that their shoulder hurts, or it may be that their chest hurts. And they have three options available to them: calling 911, going to an urgent care, or going to the emergency room. They see those three things as being equal. They're just choosing the one that is the most convenient to them and the most affordable. And a lot of times that's going to be 911. And so you are essentially going to be responding to people 7 to 8 to 10 more times a day that just want a pre-hospital health screening for something that is abnormal with their health state. Sometimes they will be experiencing something acute and severe, and you will need to intervene there to stabilize them. But most of the time, you're going to be providing them an uneventful ride to the hospital. Is that what you're prepared to get into? And do you have the mindset to provide the customer service that that patient needs? Thanks, Fire Medic Mike. Oh boy, man, I cannot tolerate a war story. I can't tolerate it. I cannot be in a room with people telling war stories. And I know a lot of people love telling war stories. I just don't. I'm not into it at all. I just would chew my, God damn it. TikTok makes me solve a puzzle to stay live every once in a while. I would chew my arm off if I got trapped in a room with people telling war stories to get out of there. I just don't have the tolerance for it. And my least favorite war stories are when someone is not really telling you about an interesting case, but the case itself is irrelevant. It's just a setup to demonstrate that they were the smartest person in the room. God, just bleh. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I am not interested in war stories. And I guess it's because I'm not that interested in myself. Like, I don't think that I'm that interesting or that my stories are that interesting. And therefore, I'm not interested in other people's stories, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how that makes me look, but there it is. I'm a lifeguard and I'm for training, and I see some that need CPR and I can give it to them. My daughter, who is in paramedic school right now, her vector into EMS was being a lifeguard and giving CPR. Best advice in my career was that you can find jobs hard, but still be doing a great job for your patient. Absolutely. I never worked a day in interfacility. No, I mean, I guess critical care is a form of interfacility, but I just didn't want to do that. Sorry, I just didn't want to do that. So my first day in EMS was in 911. I'm in the Army and feel the exact same way. I don't want to hear about work outside of work. Yeah, and I can tell where this story is going. If someone is like, hey, can I ask you about a call? Yes, let's talk about that. But when somebody says, hey man, let me tell you about this call, I'm just like, out of there, man. No, thank you. Just started my paramedic yesterday, first day of class. Awesome. Find the medics who are the smartest people in the room and make friends with them. Dear motivational video, what are your goals here with asking if we can go live together? Seriously, what's your goal here? I really just wonder what these people want, these randos that just suddenly are like sending me an invite to go live together. What are we going to do? Good morning. Last time I watched you accidentally muted me. Yes, okay. It's funny because just a minute ago, I accidentally brought up a menu on somebody's name and I was like, okay, carefully close this because I think that I muted or blocked somebody last time. So I am so sorry, and I think I acknowledged too that I accidentally muted or blocked somebody. So I am very sorry about that. I really am. Hello, Anna. Good to see you. Oh, he wants to go live with me to tell me a war story. Yeah, no thanks. They probably want to battle? What does that even mean? I don't get the. I don't. There's a whole thing going on with lives that I don't get. Like, there's this whole raw underbelly of weird competitions and points and games with lives that is absolutely meaningless to me. Like, I wish I could clear all this bullshit off of my live screen. TikTok battle is basically people throwing their hard-earned money at you. What? People are going to throw money at me? How do you win a battle? I don't like going live with other people. I've done it a couple times, and if it's the right people, sometimes it works. Like when me and Greg from Shade Tree Cardiology go live, our lives are insane. Like, we get so many viewers. But I've gone on live with other people that I thought would be a good live. But the viewers they're gone. Like, they just don't want to be live with more than one person. And I don't like it because that means that I have to keep talking to the other person who's live, and I have to ignore the people that are in there asking questions. And I really go live to interact with the people that follow me, not to do like, a back and forth with someone else. I would rather just create content together, like on Zoom or something like that, and then just post that instead of going live. Yeah, I would love to do more stuff with Greg. And in fact, Greg and I and someone else are going to be doing more stuff together in the future. Greg is what I call in the fuck of life right now. And you guys can be sending your good thoughts to him. There's just some personal stuff he's going through right now, and so he's kind of not available for stuff right now. So maybe do a live with a panel of other instructors. I want to do that, but something I'm going to do with my podcast is what I'm going to call Roundtable, where a bunch of us are just going to be together talking about medicine. We were doing this at the Heavy Lies the Helmet Critical Care Conference, where a bunch of us just started talking about medicine. And man, people just started gravitating around that, and they loved the conversation. We were like, man, we need to capture this for content. Do you have any tips for me? I begin my EMT orientation this Monday. Yes, be open-minded and read your course material. Read. Adult education is entirely self-taught. If you're hearing something for the first time in your classroom, that's your fault. Because the classroom is not for teaching you new material. It's for going over the material that you already went through. And so if you're going through your EMS class or any adult education class, like you're on a conveyor belt where you're just going through and stuff's being thrown on you, that is the wrong approach. And either you're not going to succeed, or you will pass your tests but not be a great deliverer of service. So you need to be teaching yourself. So you need to read the course material. You need to be talking to other people and refining that course material before you get to class. My podcast is on all the major podcast platforms. There's only one out there right now because it was an important topic that I wanted to discuss. I wasn't quite ready to launch, but I'm like, okay, this is something I need to cover. So, but I'm going to start bulking up and releasing them regularly soon. How do you take a blood pressure quicker on scene? I mean, why are you in such a hurry to take a blood pressure? I mean, it takes the time that it takes. People are too much in a hurry mindset in medicine. I got to do this faster. I got to do this faster. I got to do this faster. No, you don't need to do it faster. You need to do it right. And it takes the time it takes. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. If you get in a hurry to do things, you often just end up taking a longer time to do them. So focus on doing the things correctly, and eventually you'll establish a competency in it and you'll be able to do it quickly and efficiently. But we get in too much of a hurry to get things done on scene. It's not about the speed in which you do things. It's about performing the needed interventions, and those needed interventions take a certain amount of time. And if you get in a hurry or you skip them, that's going to be at the expense of the patient. So we need to get out of this mindset of moving so quickly. When you look in a highly functioning level 1 trauma center, people aren't running around like chickens with their head cut off. There is a certain amount of controlled chaos happening there, but they're doing things in the time that it takes to do them, and they're doing them correctly. And we need to be better in EMS about slowing ourselves down just a little bit to ensure that we are performing competent assessments and performing our interventions competently and correctly. Yeah, and you could pelt for a blood pressure, which is when you just inflate the cuff and where you lose the pulse, or excuse me, you inflate the cuff, lose the pulse. Once you release and you gain the pulse back, that's your systolic blood pressure. Yes, my podcast is EMS Avenger. It's technically called EMS Avenger 20 Minutes to Save the World. What do you believe is the best schedule for EMS? The best schedule is a schedule that works for you, with the caveat that not everyone, it doesn't work for everyone, right? 24/48s, I think, are some of the worst schedules unless you're not in a busy area. But even then, the 24/48 is you working for 24 hours, recovering the next day, anticipating the shift the next day, and then working. You never have a day where you didn't work the day before and you didn't work the day after. And I think that's really, really important, to have days where you're not thinking about work. If you're a busy service, then 24s and 48s, I just don't think are practical. That they're going to ruin you. But even, like a California swing may not be good for everyone. I know that third day in a busy service, that third day was hard for me. Now, what I do, my shift is I work 2 days on, I do 2 days off. I do 4 days on, and then I get 6 days off in a row. And I freaking love that schedule. However, I'm in pediatric and neonatal critical care transport. We go all around the Atlanta region, the greater Atlanta region, to pick up children in outlying areas and bring them back. A busy, busy day for us is 5 calls. The average day we're going to have is 3 calls. And it's simply not as taxing as doing 12 911 calls. You could 4 days in a row all the time for 12 911 calls is way too much. But man, that 6 days off I have in a row is amazing. By the way, if Anna is still in the live, she's a great nurse creator here on TikTok. I really like her content, and you should really be following her and supporting her. (2472s), yes. There was a service where I worked in North Carolina. We worked for the county service, and then there was a city in that county that had their own fire EMS service, and they did 24/72s, and then like every 3 weeks you had 5 days off in a row or something like that, and they had like no attrition. like nobody ever left that service. And I was so jealous of that. I really wanted to do that. I thought it was a great schedule, and they had a spot opening up, and the fire chief specifically called me. I knew him because he worked part-time for the county service. He called me and said, I've heard that you have said that you would work this schedule if you could. We would love to have you. The only caveat is that you would need to get your whatever the basic firefighting certification is. And I was like, let me think about that. And I was kind of prepared to do it. He's like, you're not going to go out and fight fires, right? You know, the worst case scenario is that you'll be called to handle the rehab, which is when, you know, the firefighters come out from the fire. We need to check their vital signs, rehydrate them, and clear them for going back in. He's like, that's kind of where you would be. We're standing by for taking care of someone, that sort of thing. But in as much as I don't appreciate a fire medic who only has their paramedic because they were forced to, and it's not something they enjoy, not something they take seriously, and, you know, doesn't give everything they have to that, I felt like I would be disrespecting the fire profession by joining that fire service with that attitude. And so I ultimately didn't take it. So I want to work with children EMS where I am at Johns Hopkins. Any tips on pediatric EMS? Yeah, our care for children in EMS is pretty piss poor. It really is. Our training is poor, and subsequently our care is poor. That's not a reflection on us as providers. It's a reflection on us on the training that we've received. So it's really a reflection on EMS as a whole. They're just not preparing us to take care of kids. How do most paramedics take care of a kid with a respiratory issue? They give them blow-by, they put them in the car seat, they strap the car seat to the stretcher, they watch their vital signs, and they transport them, and they don't do much else. And that's because they don't want to wrestle with them, to keep nasal prongs in them, to get IVs and that sort of thing. That is the worst care that you could provide a pediatric patient. You need to be evaluating a pediatric patient's work of breathing. You need to be able to see their chest. You also need to not fold them in half in a car seat, which, you know, reduces their functional residual capacity, reduces their breathing effort. It just makes everything worse. And we tend to use the wrong metrics in evaluating pediatrics as well. We tend to look at their pulse oximetry, not so much their heart rate, which is one of the most important metrics because it's really one of the only tricks that they have in their toolbox, which is compensating for everything through heart rate. We don't look at their heart rate, and they'll compensate with the heart rate and pulse oximetry until they don't, and then they just crash. So we need to be able to look at those intercostal retractions. We need to look at the tracheal tugging. We need to look at those supracostal retractions. We need to look at their heart rate and their respiratory rate. We need to look whether or not they're nasal flaring. We need to pay close attention to their lung sounds. And we just don't do a very good job at that in pediatrics. And so you cannot transport a pediatric in a car seat. And you are not taking good care of a pediatric if you're transporting them in a car seat. And if they crash, what are you going to do with them in that car seat? Now you got to get them out of that car seat, and now they're unrestrained. So they need to be in a PD-mate or whatever your child restraint system is, where if something happens, you can immediately go to work without unfastening them. So that's just the first step in taking care of pediatrics. You know, the next is in becoming competent at getting IVs, understanding that pediatrics lose fluid so fast through respiratory rate. They suffer from incredible, what we call insensible loss. They are losing so much moisture. We had a kid the other day, like a month or so old, with RSV and bronchiolitis that was breathing 80 times a minute, you know, like 3 times the rate that they should be breathing at rest. And you know how much moisture they're losing in the air? Their base excess was -20, that's a value that we can use to determine whether or not someone has a good hydration state or not. And, you know, those kids don't just need oxygen. They need fluid, and they need it badly. And so There is so much to get into on how to properly take care of a pediatric, and it also involves really good head-to-toe assessments. You really need to get good at what's called the sick or not sick approach to pediatrics, which is you walk in and within 5 seconds you should know this patient is either sick or not sick. You walk in, you're like, oh, holy crap, or okay, they look great. I got a team bracelet. Woohoo! My team has bracelets? Where's our t-shirts? Why does my team not have t-shirts? Okay, so now this question is about dual certifications for fire medics. My comment was not about fire medics as a whole. My comment was that I don't respect fire medics who pursue or are forced to get their paramedic certification who have no enthusiasm for it and who don't take it seriously, considering that 70% of calls to the fire department are for EMS calls rather than fire calls. But that doesn't, I think that picking on fire medics is low-hanging fruit. We tend to give the fire medic a lot of crap, but in reality, how many people in EMS were EMTs and then became a paramedic because they were getting more money for becoming a paramedic? I mean, I've been a paramedic for 20 years. I've been in EMS for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of shitty paramedics, a lot of shitty providers who are not firefighters, pursuing, going up the ladder, climbing the ladder for money, or because you're being forced to, is not unique to the fire service. It happens everywhere and not just in public service as a whole. People are kind of forced to keep moving up in every industry in the U.S. And I know plenty of firefighters who are incredible paramedics, or better paramedics than I am, and more knowledgeable. I know critical care paramedics who keep up on their fire certification and still work in fire services, and they are incredible firefighters and they're incredible paramedics, and I don't frickin' know how they do it. That being said, I still think that we need to divorce EMS and fire from each other. It's absurd that they are, generally speaking, expected to have this joint certification. It would be as absurd as me as a paramedic having to, I don't know, become a master plumber. The one has nothing to do with the other. The only thing that they have in common is that they drive an apparatus to a space and do their thing. But outside of that, they have nothing to do with each other, and they need to continuously evolve away from each other, because I think that it's too much to expect for one person to become a rock star in both of those things. Is there a portable ultrasound you recommend? Yeah, the Butterfly is a good one, and the Philips Lumify is a good one. The Butterfly is probably the best entry-level point-of-care ultrasound and the most affordable if you were going to get your own. There are pediatric restraint systems that attach to the stretcher that can and should be used. Yes. Good morning there, Brian. Is it Cuevas or Suevas? Forgive me if I butchered it. Had a pediatric... Okay, so you're from the UK, right, Ashley? Because you said you spelled it P-A-E-D. I always laugh when I see it spelled that way, and when I see orthopedics spelled that way. In the US, we don't use the A to lead in pediatrics, and so I always, in my head, hear somebody who's really from like either Ireland or Scotland saying pediatrics. Had a pediatric arrest yesterday. It's orthopedics. But do you think that a city or service asking them to be proficient in both can be asking too much? Yes. I've always used a car seat on top of a PD mate. Nope. Get them out of that car seat. Stop using that car seat. I'm actually going to be contacting car seat manufacturers soon to ask what sort of liability they extend or what their recommendations are as far as securing a car seat to a stretcher. It's not made to be secured there. And I think quite often the way they secure it to a stretcher sometimes just doesn't work. And we're like, I'm just pretending that the way we've secured this is a really good secure way to do it. And I'm going to be talking to EMS insurance agencies to find out if they will insure that car seat being strapped to a stretcher. I bet you neither one of them vouches for it. In classes, do you know of two good PCRs? What? Good morning from Georgia. Good morning back to you from Georgia. Because I'm in Georgia. You're in Scotland. There it is. You're a dog lover and a heart disease warrior. That's awesome. I'm a dog lover as well. There's Roxy. Roxy's a miniature schnauzer. She's a rescue. We saved her from a dog hoarder. She was like one of like 15 miniature schnauzers that were being neglected. She's a really, really good girl, and we're really upset because one of the last times we got her groomed, the groomer cut her beard and mustache, which is like verboten for a schnauzer. Like their big thing is the beard and mustache. And but they didn't cut her skirt. The skirt is the hair that comes off the stomach and the legs. They didn't cut her skirt good enough, and so it got matted. And so the next time we had a groomer, we had to get it cut. We really had to get her hair cut close, and so she looks like a fur bag standing on toothpicks. Quabus, got it. The butterfly is passable, but compared to Panasonic, it's trash, obviously. But it's it's great entry level. It's just like starting with people starting with cheap stethoscopes and then moving up to something like the Echo, So do you think private EMS better or county EMS or hospital? But there is absolutely no question that county EMS or hospital-based EMS is going to be better than private service EMS. They're just always going to have more resources and more training in third service. With almost no exceptions. Private services are about providing medical care without killing someone and without destroying profits, right? And sometimes you end up killing people that way. And I've worked in private services the last 13 years, and I think very highly of the company that I work for. I think they're a model for the way a private service can work, but they certainly don't achieve what people who work for third service achieve. My accent is terrible. Well, yeah. Don't quit my day job, right? Anything smaller than a PD mate? Yes, the Neo mate. Yeah, if you have the bottom piece, you can secure it, but you shouldn't, because it's not just about the safety of the kid. It's about that he's not a passenger. He or she is not a passenger. They're a patient. And you're transporting them for a reason. And most of the time when we're transporting a pediatric patient is for respiratory. So we shouldn't be folding them in half and then stuffing all sorts of blankets over them in the car seat. It's making them too hot. It's creating too much insensible loss. It's restricting their work of breathing. It's restricting our ability to evaluate them, and it's restricting our ability to provide immediate care. A car seat is not an appropriate means of transporting a pediatric patient. Central Georgia, all right. Sorry, do you know of any classes I can take to do good? Oh, PCR, I gotcha. So my quick advice for doing a PCR is to start in your head, just do a chronological CPR. This is what I was dispatched to. This is what I observed when I got into the scene. This is what the patient told me. This is the result of my assessment, and this is what I did. This is how I transported that patient. This is what I did in transport. This is how I transferred the patient. Think about it like that. And then essentially just described what you saw and what you did. Don't try to make it something it's not in your narrative. Like, don't try to make it a heart attack if it's not a heart attack. And don't diminish it simply because of what it is. Like, if you have a homeless person calling saying they have chest pain for the 7th time in 2 days, don't diminish that story in your narrative. Don't make it personal. Document this like the way you would someone who had crushing chest pain after running a marathon or something like that. And then don't create an orgy of information. Like, you don't have to document every single thing. I remember having a guy riding with me learning he was a new paramedic, doing his upgrade rides with me. And like on every single patient, he was talking about like even like the mucosa being moist. And I'm like, you just have to learn how to trim some fat here. Okay. If you happen to observe a clinically relevant finding, that's one thing, or the absence of what would be a clinically relevant finding, that's another thing. But you don't have to describe the patient from a cellular level in your narrative. And you also shouldn't describe things that are subjective if you can avoid it. Like, and I specifically, you can report what somebody tells you, but sometimes you don't have to pursue that. Like in a car wreck, I don't ask people what happened because I'm not going to get an honest accounting of what happened in a wreck from a patient. What they're going to tell me is what they've been rehearsing in their head that they're going to tell a police officer or a judge or an insurance adjuster. They're not telling me something that describes an accurate mechanism of injury to me that I can use to determine what their potential injuries are. And where I'm going to get an accurate portrayal of the mechanism of injury is simply by looking at the wreck itself. Is there an airbag deployed? Where is the damage? Is there intrusion into the passenger compartment? Did something burn? Are any of the posts collapsed? That's what's going to tell me what could have injured that patient, not what they told you. And I don't ask them how fast they were going because, again, that's the story that they're going to tell a police officer or a judge or an insurance adjuster. It's not an accurate accounting of how fast they were going, because if you're in a 55 mile an hour zone, then they're going to tell you 55 miles an hour, right? They don't want to indemnify themselves, and I don't want to be in a court of law repeating that to someone else either on their behalf. So I just describe what I saw on a wreck. I mean, and when I say that, there's some wrecks where you do need to kind of ask some questions on how did this even happen, right? But most of the time, I just want to know, where were you sitting? Were you wearing your seatbelt? And even then, sometimes they'll lie about the seatbelt too. Like if your seatbelt is retracted and locked in place, we know you didn't wear your seatbelt. But, were you wearing your seatbelt, that sort of thing. But for the most part, I don't need to ask them questions that are subjective, So I hope that helps. Wow, there's a bunch of messages piled up here. What do I think is a long-term solution to separating fire EMS? Overhauling the healthcare system as a whole and making paramedics degree requirements. Fire services are just not going to keep up with that. And I think there's areas where it's just not going to, where separating fire and EMS just isn't going to be a functional solution. We have to acknowledge that. Please. Which app or learning resource do you recommend to help pass the National Registry? Test will be October 5th. Limmer. Absolutely, Limmer. Hello from SYR. Is that Syracuse, New York? You made your own template for your narrative. Yeah, I have templates for narratives too. And you'll hear people discourage medics from, or providers from using template narratives. I really think that template narratives are beneficial. And this is why I started making template narratives when I realized that my narratives, I was just typing them up the same way every time. And I was like, I could save a lot of time if I just typed this up without with blank spaces and then just copied and pasted it and added it in. And what I found was when I was doing that, I was thinking, oh, what would I want to ask What would I want to ask a chest pain patient? What would I be looking for in a chest pain patient? What would I ask this patient who's in respiratory distress? What signs or symptoms would I be looking for? And I started adding prompts into my narratives. And, the call would be over and I'm finishing up my narrative and I'm like, crap. I didn't put this patient on the end title, or I didn't ask them if their pain radiated anywhere. I didn't look for this finding on this trauma patient. And I found that my pre-written narratives were actually improving my assessments, because it was kind of like a QA check after the fact. So I really think that the right type of pre-written narrative can be a really powerful tool in the toolbox of a pre-hospital provider. But what I would recommend is that you think seriously about the narratives that you're going to write up and do that. Think about the kind of assessment you want to perform. Think about the things that you're looking for that are relevant as far as the presence or absence for those different pathologies. And don't have one narrative for everything. Have a respiratory narrative, have a cardiac narrative, have an abdominal pain narrative, have a trauma pain narrative, have an OB narrative, and take the time to put the prompts in there for you that you'll actually have your own self-built QA check. It went from chief complaint to chief condition. I'd never use the word complaint. I try never to use words that have a negative implication to the patient. I don't use the word complaint. I don't use compliant. And I don't say that they are diabetic or they are bipolar any more than I would say that they are hypertension or they are heart disease, right? They suffer from bipolar disorder. They suffer from diabetes. Just started medic school. Can you recap what the new NREMT test will be? Any other school advice? Man, the messages are piling up here. I really want to encourage people to follow the bossy paramedic girl, because that is really, really the lane that she is thriving in right now. But generally speaking, keep up on your reading in class. You really have to keep up on your reading. You just really do. The National Registry test now isn't about multiple choice questions and giving you one terrible okay answer. You build things by moving things around and looking for multiple signs and symptoms and building treatment scenarios. And it's a lot more in line with how you think. And it should actually be easier for you to work your way through that. What kind of experience education would you recommend for an ICU nurse interested in HEMS? Well, you have to work on an ambulance first. You definitely are not going to go, well, I guess you can go straight to HEMS, but I mean, it's unlikely that an ICU nurse is going to be, well, I actually don't know that. I mean, there are definitely services that will hire you straight to HEMS. I mean, you have the critical care experience. You'd really just need the flight training at that point. They'll put you through your own orientation and learning program. I just want to make sure, okay, so if you're creating a narrative, you're concerned about liability and holding up in court in your PCR, don't really think about that, okay? If you're doing too much, if you're thinking about the liability of your narrative, and it's the wrong way to approach a narrative. If you just write a good, honest, descriptive, concise narrative, it's going to hold up in court. And that's because gross negligence is what has to be proven for you to be in trouble. Not not poor narrative skills, right? I mean, you can definitely have an uncomfortable day in court if you have poor narrative skills, but you're not going to go to jail because you didn't liability proof your narrative. People make too big of a deal about your court appearances as a paramedic. It can be uncomfortable. I've done it. It sucks, but just be good at documenting what you saw, what you did, and how the patient responded. That's all a narrative is. What did I see? What was told to me? What did I do? How did the patient respond? And don't go crazy. But just remember, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. Do I prefer HR or SOAP? I don't think about it like that, and I never thought about it like that. I just always have just documented a chronological narrative. There was a mode that the service I was with for 13 years was using something chart. I don't remember what it was called. It wasn't a chart, but it was close to that, and I hated it, and I refused to do it. And nobody ever gave me any slack for that, and I would constantly get thumbs ups from the medical directors, like, just wanted to pass back feedback that this narrative from paramedic Jimmy was fantastic. I could really see the scene and that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I guess if you're just putting in competent narratives, there's no reason to change. I finally caught up a little bit. Probably gonna get off here soon. I'm getting hungry and I want to go for a run. In fact, because I've caught up and there's a lull in activity, this is actually a good time to cut it off. So this was a great live. I'm going to cut a few videos out of here to post over the weekend. And I'll post this live to YouTube in case you just want the background noise. I post all my lives to YouTube. So appreciate all of you. Thanks for following me and have a great day. And if you're at work, please do good work.